The Chamber of 1,000 Tongues. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Union stretched across 3 city blocks, its ceiling disappearing into artificial clouds that processed the air for 10,000 different respiratory systems. Representatives from 847 species filled the tiered seating, each wearing translation devices that hummed with constant activity. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of clicks, whistles, roars, and synthesized speech that crashed together like waves in a storm. At the center podium stood Ambassador Krell of the Vox Collective, his 8 vocal cords producing harmonics that could shatter glass when he was angry. And right now, he was furious. "This human insults us all." Krell's voice boomed through every translator in the hall. 3 weeks we have debated the mining rights treaty, and still Earth refuses to sign. Their silence is contempt. In the back corner of the observation deck, barely visible behind a support column, sat Dr. Maya Okonkwo. She was small, dark-skinned, with close-cropped natural hair and tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a simple blue jumpsuit with no insignia, no rank markers, and no translator device. Just a notepad and a pen. The other human delegates sat in the official Earth section, 5 men in expensive suits with the latest neural translators implanted directly in their brains, allowing them to speak and understand any language instantly. They argued back against Krell, their synthesized voices adding to the chaos. Maya said nothing. She just watched and wrote. The problem no one understood. The mining rights treaty seemed simple on the surface. Asteroid Belt 7 contained enough rare minerals to power every civilization in the galaxy for 1,000 years. The Galactic Union wanted to divide it among the major powers. Earth would get a small share, appropriate for a young species that had only joined the Union 30 years ago. But Earth kept refusing, and no one could understand why. "The human delegation is being irrational," roared Ambassador Krell. "We offer them wealth beyond measure, and they respond with confusing counterproposals and endless delays." Senator Marcus Blackwell, Earth's lead diplomat, stood at the human podium. His neural translator glowed softly at his temple as he spoke in perfect Voxian harmonics. "We simply request more time to analyze the environmental impact studies." 23 studies have been provided, interrupted Ambassador Zeth of the Crystalline Sovereignty, her glass-like body chiming with irritation. "Your specialists have had 3 weeks. What more do you need?" Maya made another note in her pad. She had noticed something the others hadn't. Every time the human delegates spoke, Ambassador Krell's translator flickered slightly. Just for a microsecond. But she saw it. The debate raged for another 2 hours until finally, in frustration, the assembly called a recess. The delegates filed out in waves of color and sound, most heading toward their private lounges. Maya stayed behind, watching as the cleaning crews began their work, 6-legged threne pushing magnetic sweepers, floating arids collecting discarded items with telekinetic pulses. And she noticed one more thing: when the translators were turned off and the delegates spoke to each other in their native tongues, they seemed different. More relaxed. More honest. The observation that changed everything. That night, Maya sat in her tiny shared apartment on the station, studying recordings of the assembly sessions. Her roommate, Lieutenant Sarah Chen from the military escort, was already asleep in the other bunk. Maya played the videos at quarter speed, watching the body language, the micro-expressions, the timing of responses. And slowly, a pattern emerged that made her heart sink. The human delegates weren't just being misunderstood. They were being mistranslated. Every time Senator Blackwell said something like "we need to consider the long-term implications," his translator converted it to Voxian as "we demand additional concessions." When he said "perhaps we could find a compromise," it came out as "we reject your proposal entirely." The translators weren't broken. They were working exactly as designed, converting words into equivalent meanings. But they missed something crucial: context, tone, the space between words that humans use to communicate diplomacy and nuance. The Vox Collective didn't do nuance. When they wanted something, they demanded it loudly. When they disagreed, they roared. Their language had no word for maybe or let's discuss this further. Everything was absolute. So when human diplomacy, built on centuries of careful negotiation and subtle suggestion, went through the translators, it came out as either aggression or confusion. Maya pulled up her own notes, written in simple English with no translation. And she realized something that made her hands shake. The only way to fix this was to communicate without the translators entirely. But how do you make yourself understood when you can't speak the language? The silent proposal. The next morning, Maya did something that would have gotten her fired if anyone in the human delegation had noticed. She went to the assembly hall 3 hours early, before anyone else arrived. The cleaning crew was just finishing. Maya approached the lead throne cleaner, a being named Clickware7 who she had seen every day for 3 weeks. She held out her notepad and showed him a simple drawing, a stick figure human and a stick figure throne shaking hands, with a question mark above it. Clickware7 tilted his head, his compound eyes processing the image. Then he made a soft clicking sound that his translator rendered as "You need help, small human?" Maya nodded and showed him another drawing. This one showed the assembly podium with many figures around it, all with X marks through their mouths. Then one figure, a human, with no X, just musical notes coming from her hands in a gesture. She was going to present to the assembly without speaking a single word. Clickware7's antennae vibrated in what might have been amusement or concern. "This is against protocol, yes?" Maya nodded again and showed him one final drawing, the asteroid belt, divided peacefully among all species, with everyone happy. Then the same belt, but on fire, with everyone fighting. The throne cleaner was quiet for a long moment. Then he clicked rapidly, calling over his crew. They gathered around Maya's notepad, looking at her simple drawings, understanding what she was trying to do. "We help," Clickware7 said finally. "We all want no fire future." The day of silence. When the delegates arrived that morning, they found the assembly hall transformed. The central podium had been cleared, and in its place stood a simple stage with a large blank screen. No translator equipment. No microphones. "What is the meaning of this?" Ambassador Krell demanded, his voice echoing through the empty space. Maya walked onto the stage. Without her glasses, without her notepad, without anything but her presence. The human delegation looked confused. Senator Blackwell stood up. "Dr. Okonkwo? What are you doing? You're not authorized to." But Maya was already beginning. She didn't speak. Instead, she moved. Her hands painted pictures in the air, showing the asteroid belt, showing ships mining, showing resources flowing to different worlds. No words. Just movement and meaning. On the screen behind her, images appeared, not provided by Maya, but by the cleaning crews who had rigged the display system to respond to her gestures. Simple pictures that needed no translation. A planet. A ship. A family. Resources shared. Children fed. Peace maintained. The assembly fell silent, watching this strange human who spoke in pictures instead of words. Maya showed them asteroid mining the wrong way, one species taking everything, others starving, war breaking out. The images were crude, almost childlike, but their meaning was crystal clear. Then she showed them another path. Mining done slowly, carefully, with every species contributing their unique skills. The Vox Collective providing power systems. The crystalline sovereignty offering precision cutting tools. Humans bringing something the images showed as small figures solving problems, fixing broken equipment, finding new ways to do old tasks. Ambassador Krell leaned forward in his seat, his 8 vocal cords silent for the first time in anyone's memory. He was watching a human communicate the way his species used to, before they developed language, through pure gesture and shared understanding. Maya continued her silent presentation, showing what Earth really wanted. Not a larger share of the minerals. Not better terms. Just one thing, time to make sure the mining wouldn't destroy the asteroid belt's unique ecosystem, which contained life forms that no one had noticed because they didn't communicate in any way the translators could detect. She showed images of tiny crystalline organisms living in the asteroids, pulsing with faint light. She showed how fast mining would kill them, and how their death would destabilize the chemical composition of the entire belt, making the minerals worthless within a decade. The assembly sat in stunned silence. Senator Blackwell's face had gone pale. How did she? We didn't even know about those organisms. Maya turned to face the assembly and made one final gesture, hands open, offering, questioning. In every language in the galaxy, in every culture across the stars, the meaning was the same. Do you understand now? Ambassador Krell stood slowly. Without his translator, without his booming voice, he looked smaller, more thoughtful. He made a gesture back to Maya, a Voxian sign of respect that predated their modern language by millennia. He understood. The truth revealed. As Maya left the stage, still silent, the assembly erupted in conversation. But this time it was different. Delegates were turning off their translators, trying to communicate through gesture and expression. Trying to understand each other the way Maya had made them understand her. Senator Blackwell caught up with her in the corridor outside. Dr. Okonkwo, that was completely unauthorized. You could have created a diplomatic incident. I did create one, Maya said quietly. It was the first time anyone in the delegation had heard her speak in weeks. The incident was showing everyone that our translators are making us all say things we don't mean. That's impossible. The translators are perfect? Maya interrupted. They translate words perfectly. But humans don't just communicate with words, Senator. We use tone, timing, context, body language. And when all of that gets stripped away, leaving just the words, we sound aggressive and confusing to species who communicate differently. She pulled out her notepad and showed him her notes, weeks of observations about how translation errors were building tension, creating misunderstandings, pushing the galaxy toward conflict. Every species in that hall has their own way of communicating, Maya continued. The Vox collective uses volume and harmonics to show emotion. The crystalline sovereignty uses light refraction patterns. The Erids use telepathic pressure. But the translators just convert everything to words, losing all the meaning that comes from how we speak, not just what we say. Senator Blackwell stared at her notes, his expression changing from anger to horror. You're saying we've been accidentally insulting everyone for 3 weeks? Not just us. Everyone's been accidentally insulting everyone else. The translators make perfect sense of the words, but they lose the music. And without the music, all we hear is noise. The language of understanding. The assembly learns to listen. The next session of the Grand Assembly was unlike any in the Union's history. The translator devices remained in their cases. Instead, delegates sat in small mixed groups, attempting to communicate through gesture, drawing, and patient observation. It was chaos, but a different kind of chaos. Instead of everyone shouting to be heard, beings from across the galaxy were learning to watch, to notice, to understand without words. Maya moved between the groups, not as a diplomat but as a teacher. She showed a Voxian delegate how humans used facial expressions to convey emotion. She helped a crystalline being understand that human silence didn't mean agreement, sometimes it meant they were thinking. Ambassador Krell approached her during a break, his massive form looming over her small frame. Without his booming voice, he seemed almost gentle. Dr. Okonkwo, he said slowly, carefully modulating his volume, I must apologize. My people, we thought human quietness was disrespect. In our culture, silence is contempt. Maya smiled. And in human culture, constant loudness can seem aggressive. Neither of us was wrong, Ambassador. We were just speaking different languages, even when using the same words. But how did you discover this? Krell asked. The translators are built by the most advanced AI in the galaxy. That's exactly the problem, Maya said. AI can translate words perfectly. But communication isn't just words. It's the pause before you speak. It's the way you look away when you're uncertain. It's all the things that happen in the space between words. She pulled out her notepad, showing him her weeks of observations. I noticed that when delegates spoke in their native tongues to each other, they seemed more relaxed, more understanding. But when everything went through the translators, tension increased. So I started watching instead of listening. Krell's expression, which Maya had learned to read over the past day, showed something like respect. You learned more by being silent than our diplomats learned by speaking. Sometimes the best way to understand someone is to stop talking and start watching, Maya said simply. The hidden crisis. As the assembly worked to rebuild communication from the ground up, Maya was called to a private meeting with the Union's High Chancellor, a being so ancient that no one remembered their species' original name. They were simply called the Elder. The Elder's chamber was quiet, dimly lit, with air that tasted of ozone and memory. They sat in a form that was mostly energy, with just enough physical presence to be visible. Dr. Okonkwo, the Elder's voice came not from any mouth, but from the air itself. You have done something remarkable. And dangerous. Maya stood straight, meeting the Elder's gaze despite her nervousness. I showed the assembly the truth, Elder. That our communication systems were failing us. You showed them more than that. The Elder's form shifted, becoming more solid, more defined. You showed them that they have been arguing for 3 weeks over something that none of them truly understood. Do you know what happens when 847 species realize their translators have been betraying them? Chaos? Maya guessed. War, the Elder corrected. Not immediately. Not obviously. But trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. And you have shown them that they have been trusting a system that was imperfect. Maya felt her heart sink. I didn't mean to. You meant to help, the Elder interrupted gently. And you did. But help often comes with consequences. They gestured to a display screen that lit up, showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Already, conspiracy theories were spreading. Claims that the translators had been deliberately programmed to cause conflict. Accusations that certain species had sabotaged the translation systems. This is what I feared, Maya whispered. Then perhaps, the Elder said, you should finish what you started. You showed them the problem. Now show them the solution. The great experiment. Maya returned to the assembly with a proposal that was either brilliant or insane, and possibly both. She wanted to create a new kind of diplomatic corps, one where translators were used only as a backup, and primary communication happened through what she called immersion diplomacy. Instead of relying on machines to bridge our differences, Maya explained to the assembly, we should learn to bridge them ourselves. Send diplomats to live with other species for months at a time. Not to negotiate treaties, but simply to learn. To watch. To understand. Ambassador Krell was the first to respond. This would take years. Perhaps decades. Yes, Maya agreed. But the current system almost started a war over a mining treaty. How much time would a war cost us? The debate that followed was heated, but different from before. Without the translators creating artificial conflicts, delegates actually listened to each other. They asked questions. They admitted when they didn't understand. And slowly, a consensus emerged. The Great Experiment, as it came to be called, would send volunteers from every species to live with other species. They would learn not just languages, but contexts. Not just words, but the music between them. Maya was chosen to lead the first human group. 20 volunteers, including herself, would spend the next year living among different species, learning their communication styles from the inside. Senator Blackwell tried to object. Dr. Okonkwo isn't trained as a diplomat. She's a linguist, not. She is someone who knows how to listen, the Elder interrupted. That is the most important diplomatic skill of all. The first steps. 6 months into the Great Experiment, Maya sat in a dwelling pod on a Voxian homeworld, sharing a meal with Ambassador Krell's family. She had learned that Voxian communication was as much about rhythm as volume. A loud voice with a steady rhythm meant joy. A loud voice with an unsteady rhythm meant anger. The same volume, completely different meanings. Krell's youngest offspring, a child named Harmony in Thunder, was teaching Maya a traditional Voxian song. It had no words, just pure sound, waves of harmonics that made her bones vibrate and her heart race. You see, Krell said, watching Maya struggle with the complex vocal patterns, this is what the translators miss. This song tells the story of our people's first contact with another species. The joy, the fear, the confusion, the eventual understanding. But if you just translated the sounds to words, it would seem like meaningless noise. Maya closed her eyes and felt the vibrations wash over her. And suddenly, she understood. She could feel the story in the rhythm, the hesitation of first contact, the clash of misunderstanding, and finally, the harmonious resolution. It's beautiful, she whispered. All communication is beautiful, Krell replied, when you take the time to truly hear it. The turning point. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The crystalline organisms living in the asteroid belt, the ones Maya had shown in her silent presentation, turned out to be more than just simple life forms. They were sentient. But they communicated through light pulses so slow and subtle that they happened over days, not seconds. They had been trying to warn the galaxy about the dangers of fast mining for years, but their speech was too slow for any translator to recognize as language. Maya, having spent 6 months learning to communicate at Voxian speed, which was much faster than human speech, and another 3 months learning arid telepathy, which happened in the space of thought, realized she might be able to bridge the gap. She requested permission to return to the asteroid belt with a team of xenolinguists from different species. Together, they spent weeks in the belt, watching the crystal organisms' light patterns, noting the changes, the rhythms, the slow dance of meaning. And finally, they cracked the code. The message the crystals had been trying to send was simple: mine slowly. Live carefully. Share always. We will help. When Maya presented this translation to the assembly, the implications were staggering. The crystal organisms weren't just passive life forms. They were the key to stabilizing the mineral extraction process. They could help regulate the chemical reactions that made fast mining dangerous, but only if the mining was done at their pace, slowly, carefully, with respect for their timing. They've been offering to help us all along, Maya explained. We just weren't listening at the right speed. The new agreement. The mining rights treaty was finally signed, but it looked nothing like the original proposal. Instead of dividing the asteroid belt among major powers, it became a cooperative venture. Every species contributed their unique abilities: Voxian power systems, crystalline cutting precision, human problem-solving flexibility, arid coordination, and dozens of other skills. But most importantly, the mining was done slowly, at the pace the crystal organisms communicated. What would have been a 10-year extraction project became a 50-year sustainable operation that actually increased the mineral yield while preserving the ecosystem. The translators were upgraded with new protocols. Instead of just converting words, they now included contextual notes. When a human said maybe, the translator would note that this indicated thoughtful consideration, not rejection. When a Voxian raised their voice, the translator indicated whether the rhythm suggested joy or anger. But more importantly, diplomats were now required to complete immersion training before taking their posts. They had to learn not just to speak through translators, but to understand the communication styles they were translating from. The Quiet Revolution. 5 years after Maya's silent presentation, the Galactic Union looked fundamentally different. Interspecies conflicts had dropped by 73%. Trade agreements were being completed faster because delegates actually understood what each other meant, not just what they said. And in the Grand Assembly Hall, a new position was created: the Speaker of Silence. Someone whose job wasn't to talk, but to watch, to observe, to notice when communication was failing and to help rebuild it. Maya Okonkwo was offered the position, but she declined. I'm not done learning yet, she said. There are 847 species in the Union, and I've only lived with 5 of them. I want to understand more. The elder approved. Wisdom is knowing that learning never ends. Maya returned to her work, traveling from world to world, living with different species, learning their communication styles. She kept her simple blue jumpsuit, her notepad, her pen. She wrote observations in plain English, never trusting the translators to fully capture the nuance of what she saw. And everywhere she went, she taught the same lesson: sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop talking and start listening. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Sometimes the space between sounds contains more meaning than the sounds themselves. The legacy. On Maya's 10th anniversary with the diplomatic corps, a young human student asked her a question: "Dr. Okonkwo, how did you know that silent communication would work? Weren't you afraid?" Maya thought about it for a moment, remembering that morning when she walked onto the assembly stage without speaking. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But I realized something important. When we rely too much on words, we stop seeing each other. We stop noticing the way someone's shoulders tense when they're uncertain, or the way their eyes light up when they're excited, or the way they lean forward when they really want to understand." "But now we have better translators," the student said. "Yes," Maya agreed. "But the best translator in the universe is still your own willingness to pay attention. To watch. To listen not just to what someone says, but to everything they're communicating even when they're not speaking." She looked out at the assembly hall, where delegates from 847 species worked together in a constant dance of words and gestures, sounds and silences, each trying to truly understand the others. "Language is important," Maya said. "But understanding is essential. And you can't translate understanding. You have to earn it, one careful observation at a time." The student nodded, writing notes in their own pad, following Maya's example of recording observations without relying entirely on digital translation. And in the quiet of that moment, in the space between question and answer, teacher and student, human and alien, the galaxy continued its slow, patient work of learning to truly hear each other. Because Maya had taught them the most important lesson any civilization could learn: that the universe speaks in many languages, but understanding requires only one thing: the willingness to listen with everything you have, not just your ears, but your eyes, your heart, and your patient, persistent attention to all the things that happen in the space where words end and true communication begins.